I want to tell you guys a story. A story of how I used to suck at art. So I used to be really, really bad at art or anything that is artistic. You see, in high school, I had this assignment to draw portraits, so I had to draw my own face. I tried my best. And let me ask you this very important question. Does this look like me? So is that a yes or a no? So that's a yes. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, you can see this is not very good in my opinion. I couldn't find my actual portrait from high school, but it was much worse than this. And when I compared it with my classmates' work, let's just say that my drawing barely resembled a person at all. It was more like a potato with eyes or even a deflated balloon with hair that looks like instant noodle, right? And when I compared it with my classmates' work in front of the class, everybody just laughed because this was the difference between my level and my classmates' level. And I laughed with them because inside me, I thought art is not for me. I am a STEM kid. I'm good at maybe science, technology, engineering, and math. I will stick to numbers and equations. And for years, I believed that exact fact. But deep down, I still wanted to create. And in art class, I would have so many ideas like drawing flying cars, superheroes, or even futuristic cities. I had these ideas so clearly in my mind, but when I tried to bring them onto a piece of paper, it just never worked out. It was like having something to say, but no way to express. Similarly, my report card from high school told a very, very similar story. I was doing okay and getting the equivalents of A's in math and physics, but when it comes to art, as you can see, no exception. It was always C. And there was this one time that I got a B because I'm pretty sure the teacher felt bad that I was getting the worst grade always. So, art I thought was for the creative ones, not for me, for the people who could move their fingers and control their arms in a way that I could never manage. So that was me in high school. On a different note, I've always been very interested in robotics, as you can tell here. Ever since I was small, my parents would buy me Lego kits. How many of you have received a Lego kit when you were small? Yeah, very similar to me, actually. But when I was small, I got into competitive Lego robotics, and that is me back in 2012 when I took Lego a bit too seriously. And yeah, I was trying to move some boxes with a Lego car. And at night, apart from Lego, I would rewatch the Iron Man movies. If you guys know, I was impressed by those scenes where the robot arms would clean up the trash in Tony Stark's workshop. I was just super inspired by all of those. Finally, in the summer of 2020, I was very fortunate to be able to actually have a chance to participate in an actual robotics project at a laboratory. I was super excited. Finally, I thought I would graduate from Lego bricks into real code. So I was super, super excited. I was thinking, I would be able to participate in work such as pick and place with a huge factory robot that picks boxes into a basket, or even something like a Roomba robot, the one that vacuums your room, that moves around and detects obstacles and avoids them. So I walked into the lab on day one, ready to dive into these serious robotic stuff. But I was only to be told that my first task was to teach the robot how to draw. So I froze. You can imagine me, the kid who was drawing instant noodle with potatoes, was supposed to draw with aluminum joints, wires, and a 24-volt DC power supply. Controlling a robot was hard enough. Now, I had to draw through code. So the excitement I had turned into complete panic. It was like the art class all over again, but this time, the stakes are much higher I was afraid to be laughed at only if the robot turns out to draw like me in that art class. But I knew giving up on the first day was not an option. So I started tinkering. So this was the robot that I received. I started to control the fingers of the robot to make them move one joint at a time. Then I made them draw lines. So I could control the robot with laser-sharp accuracy. I could place the pen at whichever position I commanded, and I could vary the darkness of the lines that I drew by varying the pressures of the fingers. And although I could draw these shapes or lines with different shadows and shades with clear edges, that's when I realized something that was quite important. That art was never about the perfect coordinates. It was never about the exact darkness. It was more about the transition and the interpretation of the strong and the weak. It was how the strokes would contrast between the spaces. So if I wanted the robot to feel right when it draw artworks and have it compose actual artworks, I had to teach it those human subtleties. So I began teaching the robot to process internet images, like a picture of Albert Einstein, some work that other artists have drawn. And I began playing around with applying some algorithms like blurring the image, increasing the contrast, or even giving it a bit of a color shift, similar to how one would edit their photos on their iPhone, actually. Sometimes, I even added some random movements, just attempting to imitate how humans would draw and make it a bit more human and less machine-like. Gradually, I began to have the robot draw things that looked less like a machine and started to draw lines that expressed some kind of artistic intentions. And what was interesting is that it began expressing my intentions. Eventually, I was able to draw portraits like these. So what really fascinated me was the fact that my skills in art, how to manipulate the pencil, did not stop me from creating beautiful artworks. My coding skills and my system thinking strengths became what unlocked my creativity and unlocked my own voice in art. The robot amplified my human touch, and it turned the once stupid-looking sketch into art that spoke some kind of language that really made sense. And, originally, I thought robot was more about rigid machines, robot arms that never get tired, or even, mobile robots that never deviate from a path. But now, when I think of robots, are creative prosthetics that bridge our reality into what you can imagine. So that was a complete shift in my perspective. And this experiment that I had a very, very lucky chance of getting into, of merging robot with art, did not just stop there. I was very inspired by this experience, and I began experimenting. I began to experiment with other ways of how we can bridge robotics and art. So as you can see here today, I tried implementing different algorithms on the left side. I even tried co-creating art with robots together, attempting to teach the robot a bit of the skills that humans have. With some friends, I even hosted a workshop in which the audience interacted with art created by a robot. And today, I'm even sharing with you my story. So really looking back, my first chance to really merge robotics with art was completely awkward and unintentional and unexpected. But that single experiment reshaped my entire view of what robot and what arts can be. It opened up an entirely new perspective and a new field of which I would love to explore continually. And it even helped me draw people together through a shared curiosity. And in those moments, the art was robotic and the robot was artistic, and I was not a bad artist after all. Blending robot with art completely reshaped what I thought was possible. So this experience led me to ask myself a very interesting question, because merging art and robotics was super weird to me, but eventually it led to very interesting personal breakthroughs. So I asked myself, can this be reproduced, or is this something that's been done by other people, merging two things that are not seem to work together, basically. So I began searching for answers, and I began scrolling on the internet. And I found this very interesting example. Steve Jobs. So he's someone who revolutionized the field of product design and user experience. How many of you use the iPad or the iPhone? Right. So Steve Jobs was someone who was passionate about calligraphy, the art of fonts, and how font looks in digital design. So merging his passion for calligraphy and technology, he actually revolutionized this field. And the iPhone and the iPad that we all use today are because of this intersection of calligraphy and technology. Let's take a look at another example. Da Vinci. So he was someone who loved art, and he also studied human anatomy. He was also very passionate about religious themes. So he masterfully blended these three things and created historical artworks, like the Vitruvian Man, the Last Supper, and even the Mona Lisa. What you can notice in these drawings is the fact that all the human figures look extremely lifelike, and that is inspired by his scientific understanding of human anatomy. At the same time, he was also a master of art. To me, he was someone who was at the intersection of art, religion, and biology. And the examples go on and on. Researchers who invent by merging biology with computer science. Performers who take inspiration from both dance and digital media, and even chefs who blend culinary art with molecular science. These all show that innovation thrives at the intersection of seemingly impossible disciplines. Whether it's the intuitive design of the iPhone or the timeless work of Da Vinci, these innovations seem to always thrive at the collision of previously unconnected fields. And my own journey with robotics and art is just one small example of how these magical intersections can maybe redefine what's possible and bring us incredible insight of the world around us and who we are. Now, after hearing these epic stories, what is holding us back then? Why cannot everybody be like Steve Jobs or Da Vinci? I'm sure many of you are already innovators, but let me ask you guys this one question. I know you guys are tired, so stretch by raising your hand if you consider yourself to be a STEM kid. Someone who is good at science or technology, who thinks they belong there. Okay, I see a couple. What about humanities kid? Who consider yourself to be someone who belongs to humanity? Okay, a lot more humanities kid than STEM kids today, it seems like. But that is a very interesting case to me. Because to me, society loves to draw boundaries. Students pick a major like engineering and they dive into it for years. In Japan, we even have these separate words that define where people belong. Rike and Bunke, which stand for STEM and humanities. As if these are two sides of a coin that are never meant to face one another. And just like myself, I thought I was someone who would always, forever, belong to the left side. Yes. Someone who would never be good at art and who will always stick with engineering and robots. But now, this has changed a little bit. Because I think these artificial boundaries don't just limit our potentials to innovate, they stifle artistic expressions and new ideas before they even begin to form. So what if we stop choosing sides? What if we let our curiosity and not the labels guide us? Just imagine how much more we could achieve if we combine the best of both worlds. That's where interesting innovation happens, not at the edges, but in the overlaps of concepts that were never meant to be together. And that area is where I think there's a high probability that really cool things will happen. Through robotics, I found my own way to create art, not with hands, but with code and robots. And in doing so, I discovered something much bigger, the power of crossing boundaries and finding the beauty in the most unexpected places. And to me, true creativity and innovation doesn't only live in the products we design, whether it's the robot or the iPhone. It is when we dare to step outside of comfort zones and begin to see the world from those intersections. And sometimes those unexpected combinations create something new, and they help us understand the world in ways we never thought possible. Okay, I think the robot is not yet finished with the work here, but I am almost finished. So I would like to send or give you guys a final message, which is that I want you guys to mix the unmixable. Begin to blend things that are never meant to be blended together. Maybe even code with crayons, or make robots make Japanese green tea, or even write poetry with equations. Next time when people ask you whether you're a STEM kid or a humanities kid, don't raise your hand for both questions, or raise your hand for both questions. Because I think you shouldn't just be a STEM kid. You shouldn't just be a humanities kid. Be the unexpected artist. Thank you.